forgotten. If you have Bibles or you're well out, you can open up to the beginning of Exodus. We're going to pop around to a few different places, but the script will be on the screen behind me. But starting in chapter 1 and in verse 8, it says, "Now a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, 'Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land.' Therefore they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor." So the Israelites were forced into slavery by the Egyptians, and they suffered and toiled under the heel of their oppressors. But in the next chapter, we see this. At the end of chapter 2. "After a long time, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned under their slavery and cried out. Out of the slavery, their cry for help rose to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them." So again, there's this moment where it seems like God has forgotten the Israelites, but is then reminded of this covenant. And this reminder, it's not just a kind of passive remembering, it moves God to action. God seeks out Moses, this Israelite turned Egyptian prince who fled Egypt after he killed one of the taskmasters. It's a story we don't really have time to unpack and get into this morning. But God goes to Moses, and this is what he says in chapter 3. "The Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey." But these were all things that contributed to racial tensions in East St. Louis, and they really all came to a head when this story started to circulate about these two plainclothes police officers that got killed by a black man. And the next morning, which this all happened in July, in this month of 1917, the next morning, mobs of white residents gathered and started indiscriminately attacking black residents in East St. Louis. They found them on the street, they pulled them out of streetcars, they burnt down their businesses, they barricaded people's homes and lit them on fire so they couldn't flee. And the police and the National Guard, East St. Louis finest, showed up, and they did one of two things. They either did nothing, or they joined in. And none of this is even the worst of it. And I don't know how helpful it is for me to share a lot of the vicious details of this attack, so I'll leave it to you how far down the rabbit trail you want to go. But suffice it to say, it's one of the worst anti-black race riots in history. Hundreds were killed, thousands were displaced, homes and businesses destroyed. Businesses that could have generated generational wealth for black families, that could have been Fortune 500 companies today, are gone. Isn't it interesting that we're not taught about any of this? It's not like this was all kept under the rug. It's not like this wasn't common knowledge. This swept nationwide. There was a 10,000 person protest in New York City after this massacre. Public voices like Teddy Roosevelt and W.E.B. Du Bois and Ida B. Wells spoke out and condemned this attack. All while Woodrow Wilson, who was the president at the time, stayed totally silent, kept sending black people to die in World War I. Okay? All of this happened in our backyard, and we are not taught about any of it. Why do you think that is? I wasn't taught this history, but I was certainly fed the narrative that East St. Louis was a dangerous place full of dangerous people. And just for the record, it's not that. I've been to East St. Louis, I've walked around East St. Louis, I'm taking a group today to East St. Louis. It's not this lawless wasteland we've been taught it is. But it is a place that has been hamstrung by people in power. And there's been no attempt at reparation. There's been no racial justice. There's been no economic justice. East St. Louis continues to be crippled with disinvestment and stigma, all because 100 years ago the white community couldn't stomach the possibility of black people living in a land that flowed with milk and honey.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath